Well, good morning or good afternoon. Um, so we're going to finish up lecture module 8 today, the textbook material. We're going to pick up where we left off yesterday, and it should go fairly quickly. We're really just classifying, categorizing, listing all of the applications and uses of the internet and World Wide Web, of course. So to begin where we left off, the internet is free, these myths. We know the internet is not free. We pay for our access, whether it's our application service providers, our internet service providers. Yes, we could go to the library and log on, to a computer for free. But again, the library, the government in that case, would be paying for that internet access. So someone controls the internet? No, no one person or entity controls the internet. Um, And we know that the internet and World Wide Web are not identical. Again, the internet is the infrastructure, whereas the World Wide Web is just one service or application that exists and uses the infrastructure that is the internet. And we know about the internet's infrastructure from our work in networking. We can talk about the mediums, the messages in their encodings, the protocols, etc. I'm not going to say much about home internet connections. We're very aware. One thing that most people aren't aware, there's less and less penetration of DSL, the digital subscriber lines. So this is something that Verizon offers their broadband, wired of course, using their existing telephone, the twisted pairs. And we know about the properties of cable versus twisted pair. We know that the inherent bandwidth of that coaxial cable will always be higher than the twisted pair that Verizon offers. So how does Verizon do it though? Um, if you've ever had DSL, you'll know that when you order this, you'll get these little devices that will plug into the wall. And what these devices do is they multiplex the signal, and you should know that definition. So they filter out the lower frequencies, which are used for voice, because the human voice, really, what do we need? Between about 200 hertz and 5,000 hertz or 5K hertz. Um, Anything above that, we're getting into dog range and we don't really hear it. And really, we probably don't even need up to 5,000 because we're really talking about the high-end sibilants. And then, of course, the higher frequencies, which we know that the higher the frequency, the greater inherent bandwidth, are great for carrying data. So that is DSL. In some parts of the country, some people can only get satellite. We're talking about dish network, things of this nature. Of course, we know that it's used for media, for television, but it can also, of course, be used for data. One thing we should recognize is with our home internet connections, it's not asymmetric. We know that our download speeds are going to be much greater than our upload speeds. In the case of satellite, if you look at some of the satellite functionalities or implementations out there, they get their download through satellite, but their upload is through their phones. But there are many different ways to do this. There are other alternatives, fixed wireless internet access, directional or using WiMAX technology. Um, you can see how we're moving through this material quickly. Broadband over fiber, Verizon Fios. I would love to have Verizon Fios here, for not just for the enhanced speed, but there are other properties, recall, of photons and fiber, right? Photons don't induce that magnetic field, okay? So they're not prone to, the radio frequencies and the electromagnetic interference that, copper cabling has. And of course, wireless as well. It's about all on this slide. Search. Search is something that we all need to be very aware of, and we all need to be adept at it as well. Um, in accord with the Association of Computing Machinery's Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct, we have to remain abreast of the environment. So we have to, go onto news feeds. We have to search. It's part of our job. We need to be able to search effectively. And a couple things, if you haven't noticed, are happening which may conflict with that. In 2012, it was revealed that Google is using algorithms to personalize our search. And it's been stated that, this Google states that this is to enhance, so we're finding what we want to find. But it's also been asserted that we're finding what Google wants us to find, and we're not seeing what Google doesn't want us to find. So when it comes to search, you should be using several search engines. I've stated this before. I use DuckDuckGo, and I also use Tor, which is the onion routing. And Tor has other benefits in that it can also search or provide access to a lot of the material on the deep web. Again, the difference between the deep web and the indexed web is, of course, the deep web is not indexed. So it's not visible just to the common person. So understanding how search works, how, of course, web crawlers go out and actually index the web. And let's remember, the web is now a three-tier architecture. There aren't static HTML pages out there. So what the crawlers are finding essentially is what the sites want them to find through their robots.txt files. Robots.txt, again, will indicate to the web crawlers, the spiders of Google and Bing and all these search engines, what information they want them to crawl and index and what information they don't want them to crawl. If you're going into web design or security, you need to become very aware and adept with working with robots.txt because there's certain sensitive information, of course, that you don't want indexed and out there available through search engines. Some of the things with search engines, of course, using connectors and or using quotes around the search terms to specify that you actually want to see those terms, conjoined. So I do want to alert you to, so I did create a page just for search off of CISS100.com, lecture module 8. There's an entire page on search and how to do it effectively. So that is a resource for you. So specifying where we want to search. And this becomes very important for, say, system administrators. System administrators may have things go wrong or they may need more information on particular implementations, an AIX server. And searching the internet is great, but quite often searching certain message boards or forums can retrieve that information more effectively because it's being posted by other CIS professionals. So understanding how to do that is a very important skill as well for system administration. Okay, I won't say much more. We know about using wildcards from our Linux. Evaluating search results. This has become more challenging, at least personally. Back in the early 2000s, early 2010s, through 2015, we could just look at a site at its domain. Okay, I'm going to trust implicitly, .edu sites. I'm going to trust .gov sites, and that's still the case. But increasingly, we're finding outlets that previously may have been, perceived as just incredibly trustworthy, and they're putting out other types of information. So these days, whenever I search, I will actually, corroborate with other sites and other searches just to see, in fact, if that site is still trustworthy and putting forth the correct information. Citing internet resources. This is particularly important. And one of the most important things, along with the URL, okay, is the date of the article. Why? Because the internet is transitory. Very different than citing a textbook or a newspaper article. That's not going to change. It's going to be located somewhere in the archives that you can retrieve it, or your faculty member can retrieve it. With the internet, God forbid, you write a paper, you cite a URL, and your faculty goes to check that reference, and it could very well have been changed or could be gone. With that, I'm going to introduce something. This is not in the textbook, but the Internet Archive Wayback Machine. So what I'm going to do here is open up another tab, Internet Archive Wayback Machine. and you'll find it here. So the Internet Archive, they will go through the internet and archive the entire internet as much as they can. This is an overwhelming task. Some uses. Some of you may have entered college some time ago. You may not know that when you enter an institution, you are entitled to graduate based on the policies and, of course, the curriculum when you entered that institution. But of course, policies change. We see that with end user license agreements. We'll talk about that in just a minute. So the ability to go back and prove something existed at a previous point in time, think lawsuits, okay? All of these organizations change their practices over time, but we're entitled to provisions when we entered into that agreement. So just as an example, I will type in hvcc.edu. You see it's pre-populating, so I've done this before. And here are essentially the snapshots taken over time that the Internet Archive took of Hudson Valley. And I'll just choose 2014. Say you entered the college in 2014. And you're seeing the dates, and there'll be large gaps here. And the size of the circle will indicate how great, what extent the website was actually archived. So choose it if I can here. Choose the snapshot. My browser is clicking away. Now, again, this is being retrieved from a database, so it's going to be a little slower, but it's coming up pretty quick here. There's that old familiar Hudson Valley background, the old color scheme we used to use in our website. So here is the Hudson Valley website as it existed on that particular date and time in 2014. So this is a really useful tool for us. So kind of keep that, in the back of your mind, the Internet Archive Wayback Machine. And I'll stop that so it doesn't keep chugging in the background. So examples of web citations. Again, this is going to depend upon what you're submitting for what course, for what faculty, and it'll depend on the format. Is it APA? Is it Chicago? Is it MLA? So you'll need to follow that formatting for that particular paper. I'm not going to say much more. Browsing email. It's something that we do. We know. Message boards. I'm going to talk about this more next week, and forums as well. These are useful tools. Message boards, forums, things like that are great for IT professionals, system administrators, who can pose questions, especially in the age of open source. When I don't have an organization supporting whatever hardware or operating system I have to turn to the community. But we have to be very wary of what we post, because we're revealing inside information about what we're running, and that can be used against us. In a similar fashion, I look at how people use Facebook. Today, people are documenting their lives on Facebook. And it's become even more complex because now we have Alexa in the home, we have Siri on our devices, the Nest computer, Google Nest computer that had the microphone put in it without anyone's awareness. So it was listening. Okay. So people are documenting their very lives, every minuscule piece of it. What happens if you forget your password, say to your bank, and you call your bank? Your bank will probably have challenge questions for you. What was the name of your first dog? What street did you grow up on? What was your first school? Social engineering. Think about what people are documenting on Facebook. I just got my first dog. I named him, okay, or them. People are documenting every bit of their lives, which are used to verify who they are, to authenticate who they are. I'm old, so of course I'm pre-Facebook, and I don't participate in Facebook. So I'm pretty resilient from this type of attack, but today's people are not. So VoIP, of course, we introduced this in networking, voice over IP. Okay, so no longer do we have this circuit switched network. We'll move to a packet switched data network. These terms should be familiar with you. And again, if you, as soon as I said circuit switch versus packet switch, if you don't understand, it's an indication that you're not putting in the requisite work. Again, computer science is foundational. Any gap is in our knowledge, in our understanding, will come back to haunt us. It's not like sociology or psychology, where you can, circle back, hate to use that term, and actually look at, and come up to speed on some topics you may have missed. Social commerce. Okay, it's taking place. Facebook Marketplace. Again, I'm not going to say much more about that. Forums and VoIP. Okay, we know about that too. I'm not going to say much. I could ask the question, what type of Ethernet was created due to VoIP? Okay, so again, kind of asking a question now, bringing it all together. Is everyone doing the necessary work to succeed in this discipline? Okay, well, we know VoIP, Ethernet over power over Ethernet, was created to support VoIP because, of course, when the power goes out, your communications go down, and certain organizations need communications in the event of power failures. Police, fire, hospitals, military. Social networking, Facebook, I'm not going to say much more than that. Interestingly, Google Plus is still there for the textbook. I won't say much more about that. Social media integration. As much as I have concerns about social media, and I have concerns because of the MIT research that found that Facebook actually makes people feel worse about themselves. I worry about the security with people documenting their lives. I worry about online bullying and harassment. So I see a lot of these things, social media actually facilitates. So that concerns me. But if I were a marketer, I'd admit that it'd be foolish for an organization not to have a social media presence. It's actually important. It can actually mitigate problems if you're engaged in the community. If you can get people to tell you, what's good with your products, what's wrong with your products, how can they be improved. Most people don't understand that marketing, the definition of marketing, is actually to understand the needs and wants of your particular population. It's not advertising. Advertising is just a small part of marketing. And social media, of course, allows you to capture the input from many, many people, even those people who are not your customers. So social media integration is critically important in today's marketing. E-commerce, we know about e-commerce. Okay, of course I can purchase from anyone. Most people, of course, Amazon is now the largest company, whatever. But it can also be peer-to-peer, okay, eBay, things in this Facebook Marketplace. So, but also, and what's the supporting basis for all of this? Both social media and e-commerce, it's that three-tier architecture, okay? Without it, there'd be no e-commerce, there'd be no two-way communications, of course, which is the nature, the foundation of social media. Again, those three layers is the bottom layer of the database where all the information is stored. On top of that is the programming, also known as the business logic, okay? Because it's that programming that will extract components from the database, format them into an HTML document that gets sent to your computer and gets rendered. And of course, it's two-way, and it wouldn't be two-way without that three-tier architecture. When I make a purchase, I, of course, in the form, the web form, which will mimic the database, necessary database entries. So in that form, we'll have my, say, shipping address, my payment, my credit card, things like that. So when that goes back to the company, to the organization, that business programming, the business logic, will extract those fields, credit card, shipping address, all of that, and put it into the database so that order can be fulfilled. Okay. E-commerce payment options, we saw PayPal, and we've seen this. It's really interesting. I now see PayPal checkout, say, in Home Depot. Okay, so it's actually spilled out into the brick and mortar. Um, conspicuous here, Bitcoin. We're going to talk about the functionality, the technology beneath and supporting Bitcoin when we get to our emergent topics in the deep web, because virtually all transactions on the deeper dark web um, at least have the possibility for Bitcoin. It's actually preferred. So we'll take a look at that as well. Online entertainment, Netflix. I'm not going to say much more than that. There's a plethora of options now. YouTube now has their streaming, essentially television service, Sling, all of these, Fubo TV. Um, it's almost overwhelming. Competitive, highly competitive marketplace. Online gaming. Again, I don't play games. I will tell you something though. My freshman year at University of Albany, computer science student, most of my classmates played games. You'll see them in the labs just playing games. And I noticed that even though we had assignments due, they'd be playing games. And a lot of them started missing deadlines. And at University of Albany, there is no late submission. If that assignment is due at midnight at Friday night, if you try to submit it at 12:01, it's not accepted. And second semester, the computer science class shrunk by half. 50% of the people were gone. Computer science has the highest attrition of all the STEM disciplines, and there are many factors there. But what I observed was, again, computer science attracts gamers naturally, okay? And I chose not to play games. I made a conscious effort right then. I'm not going to play games because I see the way it's, I hate to use the word addiction, but drawing people in to where they weren't doing their coursework and they, got kicked out of the program. So just beware of that. Heading back to speaking about online gaming today has moved to an online environment. No games developed, very few games developed don't have an online component to them, but there are many security issues. Games are rife with malware and have vulnerabilities. They can open up your systems to hacking. At one point, it was about 2 or 3 years ago, it found that games had more vulnerabilities and induced more, threats into your system than any of the other websites out there. And that includes some pretty bad websites. So I won't use the word. Online news and reference. It's out there. Okay. It is, use the word. It's getting difficult, more and more difficult to get unbiased news though. RSS feeds. RSS feeds were actually extremely important when they first came out. And they still are. Many of us still have, subscription to RSS feeds. And that's the key point there. It's a subscription. You subscribe to a feed. Recall back in operating systems, there were two types of notification. Recall there was polling and interrupt driven. My example was polling was, you're at a red light. Is it green yet? Is it green yet? Is it green yet? Okay. Whereas interrupt, like my phone that vibrates when I get a text, I don't have to keep looking at the phone. It'll vibrate and tell me when a message comes in. RSS is a form of interrupts. Okay. I'm going to introduce another term here, event driven. Because when you get into programming, you'll learn about event driven programming. So what RSS does is, say I want to monitor a website. I want to know when something new is posted there. But I don't want to poll it. I don't want to go back there 5 times a day. Anything new? Anything new? Anything new? No. It'd be much better if that website, when something changed, alerted me to the fact that there was new information. Hence, I could subscribe to an RSS feed that will notify me, interrupt me when something new is published. You'll see another name for these, aggregators. Podcasts, well, much of YouTube. I'm not going to say much more than that. Um, so product, other information, it's there, information availability. Again, one of the critical things here is assessing the information. Um, going to reputable sites, .edu, .gov, things of this nature. The Internet of Things. The Internet of Things is here. It is growing quickly, and the economic forecast of it is major, okay? We're talking hundreds and hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars, greater than the gross national product of many countries. So the Internet of Things, of course, is just enabling devices with computing technology, whether it be sensors, and then connecting to a network and therefore the internet. Um, Again, what facilitated this was the move from IPv4 to IPv6 because of the greater address space. We can now give addresses to all of these sensors out there in the environment, and many great uses. I look at sports, they're putting RFID chips and many things in basketballs so they can actually determine what is the optimal arc for a particular person to actually make the basket. Flat trajectory versus medium versus a high trajectory. Baseball bat swings, things like that. All types of training in sports. And of course, our environment is becoming proliferated with these sensors. And what that all reveals, of course, is data that was previously undiscovered. Dark data, dark data, however you want to pronounce it. Um, and also, again, illuminates a shift of focus. You've heard me state this before, information technology, right? Up until a few years ago, the focus was always on the technology, right? How fast is it? How's the networking? What are the capabilities? The focus has now shifted to the information. Whoever has the most information has the competitive advantage. Why? AI, machine learning, deep learning. So when you look at it, who has the most information? Well, we could look geographically. Who has the most people? China, India, okay? Um, or we can look at who's collecting the most information. Facebook, Google, okay? So these are very powerful entities. And as we just saw very recently, last few months, um, the likes of Twitter, Facebook have actually gone toe to toe with countries. And we've seen science fiction, of course, where corporations become more important than countries. So we need to be aware of this. We need to keep an eye on it. Online education, I'm not going to say anything about. Here we are in an essentially online Zoom class here. Web-based learning. I will make just an anecdotal note here because I get a lot of questions, and throughout my tenure as a department chair, how valuable are certifications? Well, it depends. Depends on the certification. If you look at the Oracle Database Administrator certification, the DBA, it's an incredible credential because no one's faking that. Okay, it'll take you years to get that. Whereas other certifications, you could book, learn, and study and memorize the material, but not really have the capability to apply it. And that's what a company wants. So companies, they will look favorably on certifications, but they also, I guess they're on guard too. They're aware that there are some like paper certifications out there that really don't have that applied knowledge. Blogs, web blog, okay, essentially put out there, essentially broadcast one direction by a person or organization. Blogs, you can, of course, have two-way communication on them. It's a lot more work if you allow comments, two-way communication, because who knows what someone will write, okay? It may be completely inappropriate. And then you will become responsible for that. If you consider, God forbid, Someone posts something, a comment inappropriate on your weblog, and say a web crawler comes along and indexes that content. Now it's indexed out there. People could find that inappropriate comment through search. So when you look at blogs and enabling comments, it's a lot more challenging. Um, wikis wikis are great in the fact that they can collect collective intelligence and collective, the wisdom of the crowd. Um, we can look at bees, we can look at ants as models. And yes, a population will have much more knowledge than any individual person, okay? A lot more perspective. It can be more objective because it can be looked at or evaluated from a perspective that, I didn't even know existed. So wikis can be very important. Um, Generally, they're not acceptable or credible enough to be used in academic papers, but that'll depend on your faculty, depend on the degree too. Much more likely at the undergraduate level than at the master's and PhD level. Censorship and privacy. Two critical issues today on what is taking place. I'm not going to say much except that I'll let you know. I'm approaching 60 here. Uh, Veteran, Eagle Scout, all that. I didn't think I'd ever observe what I see taking place today, both in censorship and privacy. Just the fact that Google included a microphone in their Nest thermostats and didn't tell anyone, and even omitted it from their technical data, but yet it was listening and sending information off.
Can I say something, Mr. Luby?
Absolutely.
Like, right now we're in the information age, and then before information age, I feel like, with capitalism, they're really doing their dirty work with capitalism, with politics, and, more things were being done behind our eyes. Now, like with us in the information age, it's very similar in some strange way. Like you're just taking advantage of us, okay, and doing a little thing at a time and getting whatever they can out of us without even letting us know. So like I have been researching a bunch of that stuff up on there, and like, they're like, give these simpletons this information, and most of the people, instead of like, the power we have on this information, right, is amazing. We could all be geniuses. People want to post pictures of themselves and like bubbles, and all these weird things on social media, and they don't take advantage of what greatness this actually really is, and they knew that, and you're seeing it. We're seeing it go down. So I totally agree with what you're saying. It's very interesting to me. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I just wanted to get that.
No, that's fine. I wish more people would cut me off. When we get to the emergent topics, I'm actually going to show that TED Talks. It's from 2012. And I forget if he's computer science faculty or psychology faculty, who first identified the, I don't want to use the word misdirection, censorship, I'll use his word, personalization, that Google and Facebook are using. And he stated that he came from rural Maine and that the internet was just something, I'm going to misquote him, but, big and bright. Here's all this information. So for someone growing up, who knows, on a farm in a rural area, to have access to all of this information, but then later learn that it's really not unbiased and we're being led to things. So, he at first, of course, looked at it through rose-colored glasses, and then realized, well, it's not what he thought it was. So we're gonna watch that TED Talks when we get to the emergent topics, the last weeks of class, and that's 2012. And so I guess I'll digress here for a minute here. Let's recall that Google began working with the Chinese government in the early 2000s because China, Google was not allowed there unless they actually actively censored material. So Google began working on their, personalization algorithms for China in the 2000s, and it's only evolved. At one point, this was back in the mid-teens, around 2013, 14, and I was very active in really understanding. Of course, I researched this as soon as I learned this, what Google did for their search. And the number of signals, they were using 56 different signals, some of which were databases, things like that, to lead us to, again, what they said, what it thought we wanted to see. Um, and then, of course, in Senate, United States Senate in October 2020, it was revealed that Facebook shares data. They have an internal application with Google, Facebook, and Twitter. So they're sharing information amongst themselves about our browsing habits, where we go. And then, as of yesterday or 2 days ago, the Supreme Court rejected an appeal by Facebook because it's been found that Facebook actually has been tracking us even when we're not logged into Facebook. Okay, the Facebook app on your phone, things like that. It's still tracking us without our knowledge, without our permission. But then again, oh boy, we go into those end user license agreements, and there's a saying out there, click to continue, because you want to participate. And companies are using this to say, oh, wait, you agreed to this. You support what we're doing. When that may be not be the case, but let's remember, in each one of these end user license agreements by Google, by Facebook, by Twitter, is that statement that they can change their EULA at any point they want. So you're clicking I agree, that there's, these companies are saying, okay, you support what we're doing, but you clicked at a point in time when they could change what they're doing, and they're still saying, well, you clicked, several months ago, you agree, regardless if we changed our end user license agreement. So there are things taking place that the common person on the street is not aware of, and I have concerns. Um, it is permissible, of course, for organizations, businesses to internet filter. Okay, it is entirely acceptable for the place where you work to not allow Facebook, eBay, Amazon, these sites, right? Because that organization thinks, and of course, rightly so, that you should be working when you're at work. Um, so internet filtering by organizations at work is entirely acceptable. We know about cookies. Um, what they do is they facilitate session management, and that's necessary because that HTTP protocol, again, is stateless. Okay, I go to ESPN.com. If there's no cookie set, I go back to ESPN.com. ESPN thinks it's seeing me for the first time. Okay, so cookies are necessary, but even they can be abused now. In the early 2000s, when cookies first arrived, and rightly so, they were used, appropriately. Now, organizations are downloading all of the cookies off our machine, even if they're encrypted, and it's progressed to where they can now decipher and see. Of course, there's history too, where we've been, what we've been looking at, and you've seen this. You'll go to some site and you're looking at some product. You'll leave that site, and suddenly, now there are many other factors here. It depends if you got there through search or just happened upon it. And suddenly, in your the right bar along your browser, you now see ads for similar products. So there are many things going on here, but cookie mining is taking place. It even can be used in ransomware. Some people, companies, organizations will download cookies to see where the person has been. And if they've been somewhere inappropriate, they will blackmail them. We will reveal to your wife you were on this site because here's this cookie which establishes evidence of that. Your preferences, managing your cookies, will be in your browsers. Go to your browser preferences or settings, however it's named. And I do block third-party cookies. I block almost all cookies. The only things I allow are for Blackboard, for my session management with Blackboard, and a few sites. It doesn't allow me to go to many sites. There's sites I cannot go to because I will not allow those cookies, but truthfully, I'm okay with that. Spyware and adware. I'm not going to say much about this at this juncture. Next week, we have a chapter on security, and we'll cover spyware and adware in much more detail, and also from its functional or technological basis. So I superficially, yes, sometimes used by advertisers to gather marketing information. Okay. Email privacy. Well, you should be encrypting your email. Okay. Now, Gmail, some time ago, there was a checkbox. It wasn't mandatory. Now all Gmail is encrypted. Great. Which means it really can't be intercepted and deciphered. However, let's recognize that Gmail, Google still gets to read our mail. Okay. And they are, again, putting this into their machine learning, their deep learning algorithms to learn more about us, to profile us, and for their predictive analytics. And that is the end of the chapter. So again, that's lecture module 8. Next week is we really get into security in far more detail. If you have any questions, of course, let me know. Otherwise,